The scripts that I use to create the tables, I might briefly just shown them. They look like this, and they're sitting on my side. You could write them all out if you want to. Otherwise, you can just send me a text, either comment down below or reach out to me some way or another. You can grab a hold of me on Instagram or whatever you can find me. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I can send you these files so that you can use them and populate them in your own database. I will, well, right now we're only 31 people subscribing to the channel, so it's not like I'm very busy replying to comments. So let me know if you need it or you want it, and I will send it over as fast as I can so that you can get on the same page as me. Then everything is the same, and hopefully you can one-to-one follow along. That's the intention. So now that we have some tables, then we can start querying them. So if we create a new query, like I just did up here, so we'll just start from beginning. We click create new query. Then what you're seeing here is where we write the statements. So we just wrote all the create table statements, but this is going to be your main operating window. There's a lot of different bottoms and things you can click all over the place. Coming from myself professionally, who has used this application for 3-4 years now professionally, I don't use 95% of it. What I use is the databases, the Object Explorer here a bit, because I want to make sure that I'm connected to the right thing, and I want to make sure that the window that I have open is connected to the right thing. Oftentimes, at least in my professional life, we have a lot of different servers and a lot of different tables, so you have to be careful being in the right spot, and you can do that by using this. And that's actually what I missed in the beginning, because I was in the master. Rookie mistake. I should have been in the course example, which is the server or the database that we've created for this purpose. So now I'm here and I can see that in this window that I have open, I'm connecting to course example. This is basically what it tells you. So and I'm connecting to this server. So if I need to connect to another server, I can choose it here, and then I will have to choose my database from this list also. But for now, we're in the right space. Those two things I use. Then I use new query and execute. And I don't actually use them because I'll just click Control N, and if I have to run something, I'll click F5. So I don't actually use these two clicks. I just use the shortcuts. But besides that, I don't really actually touch anything. I am just an analyst, so I just need to analyze the data that is inside of the databases, and that is all being done in the window that you have open here. So I will teach you the basics. So as in any program, there is a million things you can do, or in any language, there's a million things you can do. But I have built my whole professional career on a 2-day course where we learned less than 10 statements. And once you know how to use those, and they are not difficult, once you know how to use those, you will be set. You can Google things and you can learn more than that, but if you know those basic 10-ish things, then you're quite good to go. So what are those 10 things? They are select, they are from, they are join, they are where, they are and, they are like, they are or, they are in, keep the same format, they are in, they are between, don't really use that much, they are count, they are distinct, and that's it. What is that up to? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, 11. I was lying. Sorry. 11. If you know these things, then you're good to go. As I showed you before briefly, there's the most simple thing that you can write where you get an output. Now that we have the tables and we have some database, now that we have the database and we have some tables with some content in it, the most simple thing that you can write as a statement where you get an output is the following. Select star, which means everything from gender, for example, from dbo.gender. So when you run that, you get the output looking like so. You can also, if you don't want to write it to begin with, you can also right click over here on a table, and then you just click select top 1000 rows, and then it creates the script for you, looking a little bit differently, but in essence it does the exact same thing. And then you get the content of the table out. Now, if there were more than 1000 rows, it would only give you the top 1000, but in this instance there's only two rows, so it'll just give you everything. But essentially it does the same, right? So it says select everything, and instead of writing everything, it gives you all the columns from dbo.countries. And then it says top 1000 here. And if we mark that only, then this is the output. So it's just written a little bit differently, but the syntax and the output is the same. So there you go. You can either write it like this, or you can right click it over here, and then you get some output. And the output is always shown in the output box down here below. So if we go back, if we close these, and we go back again to, let's say, the products, and have a look at that, we'll say select top 1000 rows. Then this is oftentimes the way I start my script. So if I have an idea about what I need to create, then I will select everything, top 100 of everything, and then I get the content out, because from here I can see the different names of the different columns. So that's the easiest way to start off your script, basically, because from here you might say, well, what I actually need is the merchant ID and the name, and then the status. I don't need the price or the created by, in my example right now. Now, the way for you to write that is, now you have the layout and you have the visualization of the columns, and you also have it listed up here. So you start your query statement by saying select, and we again here we won't press it to run, but we will say select everything from dbo.products. And the reason why we say select star to begin with and then now go up and delete it is because we want to reference a table before to begin with, before we start writing out the columns. And we want to do that because when we now have it here, the machine itself will start referencing it, because it knows that we're referencing columns in the dbo.products table. But if we don't mention this down here, then we have to write it all out by hand, and then we might be able to misspell or whatever, which is not good. So we write the first column, and then we said we also wanted the name. So we start writing the name, and then we also wanted the status. So we start writing the status. And then this might look good. Apparently there's some red lines, but we'll just ignore that, and then we will run it, and it'll say incorrect syntax near status. And actually also before, but never mind that. So what is happening here is that we need to, in between the columns, we need to offset it by a comma, like so. Otherwise it won't work. So if you take this and run it, it will now work. And there's a whole religion about where you put your commas. Do you put it like this instead of down here, or do you put it like so, and then you push them out a bit, like so it's all nice and good looking? Personally, it does not. Well, you don't need it on the first one, but on the second ones you do. Personally, I don't care. You just have to know that the machine reads it from A to Z, so it reads it from up here and then it starts going down. And if the columns and if the separators are there, then it will work. You could also, even though this is highly illegal, you could write it all like so, and this will still work. The only problem with this is that it's impossible for people to troubleshoot and read it without getting confused. So please keep a nice format so it's easy for people also to read your scripts if you have to share it. But this is a select statement from, very, very basic statement. Oftentimes it won't be enough, but it'll be a good start. So now that we're taking an offset in the products, then we might be interested in getting some other information, because you can see here that the merchant ID is 1001 or 1002 and 3 down here, which is IDs that refers to other tables in our database. Now, before we get into that, then let's have a look at the users table. So you can see here the different columns that we have. We can just write it out like this also. Select everything. Now you should get the hang of it from dbo.users. So if we take this and just throw it out the window, then we'll do it ourselves. Then we get this output. But let's say that we want to get the output out like this: first name, last name, email, gender, and country code. So now it's the same result, right? We get the same content when we press F5 and we run it, but now we have all the columns listed, and that also allows us to say, well, we actually only want the first name, so we can delete the last name and run it again, and then the column disappears. A couple of things I want to mention here is the functionality of changing the name of the column that we are querying. So let's say that this one right here is gender, and let's say that we want to call it sex instead of gender. Then the way for us to do that is to say gender as, and then we use the single quotation marks and we write it sex, like so. And then we put a comma, because otherwise it won't work. If we take this and run it, press F5, then you will see that the column header has changed. And we can do that on all of it. We can do it on all of it, and it will update accordingly. Now, we played around a bit with select and from statements. What I want to dive into now is the connections between tables. So in the very beginning, I was elaborating on that you can have the sex here, if we just change it back to gender, whoop, and a comma, the gender. So there's gender 1 and gender 2, but we need the actual transliteration of what that means. Does that mean male or female? And we know that if we open the gender table, instead of us opening, we'll just write it. Select everything from dbo.gender. So if we have those two things running, then we can see it visually with our eyes that gender refers to male, gender 1 refers to male, and gender 2 refers to female. Which is weird because this is a man's name, but it doesn't matter. We can see it visually how that connects, but the way for us to write it in a query is like so. So the order of statements is select something from, and then we write the joins, and then if we have filters, so where clauses we call them, where country equals something, or gender equals 1, or the name equals something, whatever, then that comes below it. So we have now select, and then some columns, and then the from statement. So now down here we will do join. So we join the table that we want to reference, so that will be the dbo.gender. So we join dbo.gender, and then we give it a name, which is also a good idea to do up here. So we can say, well, this is actually a perfect example of so, because now that we start referencing the gender, you can see that it highlights as red here, because there's both an ID here and an ID here, and a gender here and a gender here. So now the machine doesn't know which of the IDs or which of the genders that it needs to use. The way for us to circumvent that is to use a naming convention. So if we remove this and go back to the land of happiness, then we can add a bit of naming convention to it. So we'll say from dbo.users as you. So we give it a prefix of a letter. That allows us to say u.id, u.firstname, meaning that the uh, ID and the gender and all of the other stuff is coming from the U table, which we have defined as being the dbo.users table. So now when we start writing the join dbo.gender, besides this down here, which doesn't matter, it might get a bit confused, the content up here is now fine because the machine knows that the gender that we want to have is the gender from the users table, not the gender from the gender table. So we will do the same here. Write join dbo.gender as g on u dot gender equals g dot id. So what this means, if I'll just try to very point it out, what we're saying is that from the users table, which is up here, and this is the genders table, from the users table, the gender column, so the u.gender equals the g.id. So those two things, that's what we're joining it on. And this is where you have to be a good architect, or maybe you don't have to, but hopefully in the company that you work in, there are good architects that knows how to set this up correctly, because you could argue that maybe I shouldn't have called this one up here gender and this down here gender, and then them not being the same. I don't know, doesn't matter, this works. We now know that this u.gender equals the g.id. So if we write this, then we should be able to add a comma here and then reference the g.gender. So hopefully what this means is that we've now connected these two tables, which we can see connect visually by the looks of it right here. And what we now hope to get out in the query up here is the gender, and in the gender isn't the ID, but it says female or male. This is so poorly written. I'm not pirate software yet. So we run it by clicking F5, and we can now see that we get the name of the gender out. This also means that we can take this one out because we don't want this, doesn't matter to us anymore. So if we delete the u.gender and run it again, we changed the columns of what we needed or what we had from the ID itself. It doesn't really mean much to us unless we know that 1 equals male and 2 equals female. And then we just brought the actual gender in with the content instead by doing a join.